The Age of Cradles. The first heart ignited. Approximately 25 million years to 1 million years ago. Known now as the first age of the lattice. Long before memory had a name, when the cosmos was still cooling from its early storms, there came wanderers among the silent stars. They called themselves the Mithar'itra, and they were neither conquerors nor colonists. They were aligners, listeners pressed against the skin of the universe, searching for the architecture hidden beneath all things, and they found it. Threaded through all space, all matter, all energy, there lay a subtle crystalline structure, the Aberrantis Lattice. It was not dead scaffolding. It was alive, pulsing, humming, shimmering with waves of varying frequency, amplitude, and hue. Every particle carried its resonance. Every photon sang. Every flicker of thought rippled outward through the weave. The Mithar'itra realized they had discovered the native language of existence itself, geometry, rhythm, and light. They preserved their guiding truth in what became the first canticles. To harmonize is to exist. To shape is to continue. With that understanding burning in them like a second heartbeat, the Mithar'itra began their grand work. The seeding of life across the expanse, binding worlds into networks of interdependent resonance, and laying the foundation for what would one day become the pathways. Yet this work was not without cost. To achieve perfection, sacrifice was often required, a truth that would take millennia to surface and lifetimes to regret. The spectrum of Aberrantis. To understand the age, one must first understand the medium through which it was built. Aberrantis was both material and metaphysical, a crystalline substance permeating all dimensions, capable of condensing into solid matter or blooming into radiance depending on how it was tuned. Over millions of years of patient study, the Mithar'itra charted its full spectral ladder. Each hue corresponded to a unique resonance frequency and governed a distinct domain of influence, and together they formed the palette with which the Mithar'itra would paint worlds into being. There was crimson, called Corinne, the hue of thermal and kinetic force. It controlled heat and fusion energy, formed the cores of Heartstones and star engines, and could stabilize fusion reactions or unleash them in controlled bursts. Then came amber, Vinthra, the hue of magnetic and structural power. It stabilized gravitational fields and tectonic flows, held planetary geology in balance, and gave rise to float engine architecture and orbital alignment. Emerald, known as the Lena, governed the biological and regenerative, directing cellular growth, adaptive mutation, and the shaping of entire ecosystems. It could accelerate evolution or mend a collapsing biosphere. Cobalt, here Tuan, ruled the atmospheric and fluidic, oceans, weather systems, air currents. Through it, climates could be tuned, hydrological cycles regulated, and breathable atmospheres sustained. Violet, Mithar'itra, touched the temporal and synchronic, tuning rhythm and progression across space-time, maintaining orbital stability, and preventing temporal drift between networked worlds. And finally, clear or white, Aurel, the psychic and dimensional frequency. It bridged consciousness across distance, served as the medium for thought transference, memory storage, and would eventually enable the quantum transport of both mass and mind. Each hue emitted a distinct wave signature, not merely sound, but oscillations in the fabric of reality itself. And the lattice was no static field. It was a living network, pulsing with the resonance of uncounted worlds, stars, and minds. The Mithar'itra learned to read those waves as others might read light or touch stone. They became the first to tune reality, the great seeding and the Heartstones. Once the lattice was understood, the Mithar'itra turned their knowledge toward creation. Their greatest instruments were the Heartstones, crystalline engines containing symphonic arrangements of Aberrantis frequencies, each one designed to be embedded deep within a barren world's mantle, where it would awaken that world into life. The process was layered and precise. Crimson resonance ignited dormant planetary cores, releasing geothermal energy and stabilizing rotation. Emerald waves shaped organic compounds from sterile soil, triggering evolutionary leaps and cultivating ecosystems where none had existed. Cobalt frequencies drew water from mineral substrates and generated breathable atmospheres from volcanic outgassing. Amber waves locked tectonic plates into stable configurations, preventing catastrophic shifts during the fragile seeding process. And violet pulses ensured each planet matured at a steady, predictable rate, synchronized with other seeded worlds across the growing network. Over millions of years, the worlds ripened. The Mithar'itra called them cradles, each planet a carefully tuned note in the growing chord of existence. Yet the Heartstone was double-edged. Properly balanced, it nurtured. But if left unchecked, its resonance spiraled inward, consuming the planet's substance faster than renewal could sustain. The outcome of such imbalance was absolute, all mass refined into condensed Aberrantis glass. The crust vitrified into crystalline layers, the atmosphere ionized into luminous plasma. What remained was a small, blinding sphere, a white crown of perfect silence, lifeless but radiant. Transcendence and the crown worlds. The Mithar'itra did not fear this outcome. They named it Transcendence, the culmination of a world's existence, its matter elevated into a perfect crystalline resonance, unchanging and eternal. To them, a crown world was not death. It was apotheosis. Later ages would remember this philosophy with horror. But in the time of the cradles, it was doctrine. What elevated crown worlds from spiritual concept to strategic necessity was their unforeseen property. Each consumed world amplified the Aberrantis Lattice exponentially. When arranged at precise intervals, crown worlds acted as resonance amplifiers, focusing and magnifying lattice waves across vast distances. Through them, the Mithar'itra achieved a breakthrough that redefined their civilization, quantum transference through the pathways. By stepping into a tuned field near a crown world, a being or object could shift its resonance signature to match a distant crown's frequency and instantaneously manifest there, not by crossing space, but by becoming the same wave in two locations and collapsing into one. This was not faster than light travel. It was the elimination of distance entirely. With this discovery, the pathways were born, not as roads, but as resonance bridges anchored by crown worlds, allowing instant movement of mass, energy, and thought across galaxies. The cost of transcendence. But crown worlds required sacrifice. The transformation of a living planet into crystalline permanence meant the annihilation of everything upon and within it. In the early ages, only barren or uninhabited worlds were chosen for transcendence. Yet, as the network expanded and the demand for pathways grew, exceptions were made. Worlds with fledgling ecosystems, worlds still harboring remnants of previous seedlings, these too were chosen. The Hagen folk stationed on such worlds were given notice, time to evacuate, to preserve genetic archives, to salvage memory and knowledge. But not always. Not all wardens or inhabitants could be relocated. Resources were finite. Timelines were strict. The collective's ambitions outpaced its compassion. Some Hagen folk were utilized in the transformation process itself, integrated into the resonance collapse, their matter and minds refined into the lattice structure of the new crown world. Their essence became part of the amplification matrix, their consciousness dispersed across the crystalline field, perceiving eternity but unable to act, speak, or end. This practice, though rare at first, grew more common as the need for crown worlds increased. The Mithar'itra framed it as honor to become one with the lattice, to serve the greater pattern, to ascend beyond flesh. The Hagen folk recorded it differently. Whispers began. Resentment seeded among the higher orders of worlds. Not all accepted the doctrine of transcendence. Not all believed in the right of the Mithar'itra to decide which worlds would sing and which would fall silent forever. This resentment would grow slowly and quietly across ages until it found a champion in the deep and a voice in the vast. The Hagen folk, anchors of the lattice. Where the Mithar'itra dreamed in geometry, the Hagen folk made those dreams endure. They were physically robust, soil-bound and patient as stone, the stewards of raw and refined Aberrantis, gifted with an intuitive sensitivity to the lattice's oscillations. As artisans of frequency, they could touch unrefined Aberrantis and sense its dissonance or purity, shifting its hue with subtle manipulations of pressure, heat, or magnetic fields. As tenders of growth, they maintained the balance of each planet's lattice veins, ensuring ecosystems remained stable and resonance flows stayed within safe thresholds. As guardians of the Heartstones, they oversaw when seeding should halt so worlds would not over-refine, and they prepared planets for Heartstone extraction or crown transformation when called upon. And as tuners of the lattice, through patient work with Orwell and violet frequencies, they kept interplanetary resonance patterns stable, ensuring safe passage once the pathways were established. Over millions of years, the Hagen folk evolved into beings uniquely suited to their role. Their bodies grew dense and adaptive, capable of withstanding extreme temperatures, pressures, and radiation. Their hands could shape crystal as easily as clay. Their minds perceived time in slow, steady rhythms, ideal for work spanning millennia. The alliance between the two species was called the Accord of Two Songs, and it was the bedrock of the age. The Mithar'itra expanded the network of living worlds. The Hagen folk maintained the lattice that made such miracles possible, but the Accord, for all its beauty, was not equal, and in time that imbalance would fracture everything. The philosophy of expansion. For the Mithar'itra, the work was not empire but worship. Every world seeded was a verse in the eternal pattern. They taught that when all resonances were aligned, when crimson and violet, life and void, thought and stone pulsed together, the universe would rise beyond decay into pure geometry, a state where entropy itself could not exist. Their achievements between 25 and 1 million years ago stand unmatched. Millions of living nodes seeded and linked across vast gulfs of space, Aberrantis constellations visible across interstellar distances as colored auroral waves threading the void, fractalis vessels, semi-sentient and grown from the lattice itself, traversing between nodes of the cosmic web and crown worlds, silent, radiant, and perfect, anchoring the first true pathways. And beneath it all, the Hagen folk kept the rhythm steady, endlessly tuning the pulse of creation. The hungry song. Yet balance trembled. Subtle distortions crept into several Heartstones, beats misplaced, pulses too slow, cores glowing with crimson dissonance. The Hagen folk, who felt the lattice more intimately than any Mithar'itra ever could, named this sickness the hungry song, a resonance that fed upon itself, drawing more than it gave. The Mithar'itra dismissed it as statistical noise. Their confidence was absolute, but deep beneath the crust of one seeded world called Arindar, something stirred in answer to that hunger, a being that would one day echo the pattern back upon its makers, and consume not worlds, but empires. The legacy. When future ages looked back upon the Age of Cradles, all else became myth. The Untir still recite the phrase as invocation. The first light sang, and from it came worlds. They no longer know that light was the ignition of the first Heartstone. The moment the universe's own crystalline lattice first pulsed with purpose, when the Mithar'itra taught existence how to resonate, and when the first seeds of resentment were sown in silence,